Okay. I see something on there, but I can't really read what it is, so I'm scared. Are we doing another surprise for me today?
Oh, on my screen? Oh,
yeah.
Good morning, Jenny White. Good morning, all the people of broke. Jenny's worried about what I'm getting ready to put up on the screen. Jenny's worried. Is that what you're saying, Jenny White?
Well, I don't know. After last time. Not again. Oh, my word.
There we go.
I knew it would have to be something.
Jenny White.
The disinfectant.
The brave heart.
It looks like somebody sprayed disinfectant on me is what it looks like. Oh, my goodness. Hey, we're live on Rumble.
There you go.
Aren't you excited?
Yeah.
I think I finally figured out whatever it is that they're doing.
Well, I'm glad. We've got a lot of people on Rumble.
I know. Well, I was talking to somebody yesterday, I believe it was, who also has a podcast up on Rumble. And I said something like, it would be great if it worked. And he said, oh my gosh, you have the same problem too. So apparently this isn't just operator issue, which is what I was thinking it boiled down to, since most of them are operator issues. Yeah. I was thinking that was me. That I'm starting to revisit that whole idea of maybe it isn't me.
I don't think it is.
Yeah, I just don't know. I mean, the only thing I'm looking at it now, and it actually is live. So the only thing I can think of is that it just doesn't like it when I try to schedule more than one at a time. It's like, no, I can't handle that. The clock means nothing to me if you do that. So I have something after we have Representative Steagall on this morning, because I want to get started with him, because I know that's why people are automatically just jumping on this morning. After that, I would like to talk about something that is another one of those. It comes from ACOG. It came up at our Luthertown meeting last night. And it's another one of those 15-minute city power grab things that they're trying to shove down into the little towns. And I might have to make Representative Steagall aware of that as well, since he has a smaller town that he's involved in, lives in. And it's just irritating. So don't let me forget, and we will go over that. I've already contacted the network.
Yeah.
I sent it out last night. You guys, watch for this.
Well, I know we're going to be talking about a lot of constitutional issues, especially property tax, which you and I both absolutely despise with our very core of our being. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn for you there, but I will say, and this is my opinion, Jenny. I'm not speaking for you. In my opinion, if we don't return to a constitutional money system in this country, we're never going to get out of all these things. We have these private Federal Reserve Bank, these private banks printing these notes that have no honest money. There's nothing honest about it. And, it talks about, there's several things in the Constitution talk about that. I know we're not talking about any of that on today's show, but in my opinion, unless we get back to a system of honest money in this country, we're never gonna overcome what this debt is.
Well, something tells me our guest would be right up there, right in the same boat with you. So let's bring him on and ask him, shall we?
Sounds good.
Good morning, Rep. Steagall. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing great. How are you guys?
We are good. So what do you think? Should we return to the constitutional money system?
I believe we should. I think Michael's spot on. And I'd like to start with a James Madison quote. I love this. As you guys know, I travel all over the state giving one of the segments of my we called it the Constitutional Convoy Project, but I wrote an 8-part series a few years ago on our founding documents. And one of my favorite James Madison quotes is this: "The diversity in the faculties of men from which the rights of property originate is not less an insuperable obstacle to a uniformity of interests. The protection of these faculties is the first object of government." And I love that quote. There's so much in there, and our founders, of course, had a way with words. They could pack so much in with so few words. But really what James Madison is referring to here is the first job of government that we see in the preamble to the U.S. Constitution, and that's the establishment of justice. And it is impossible for us to establish justice and at the same time go vote to take each other's stuff away from one another at the state capitol in some way, shape, form, or fashion. Exactly. So the protection of our properties, which, we're going to talk about property taxes and maybe a few other things this morning as well. Our founders actually spoke against those types of mechanisms to some great extent, actually, to the point where the father of our Constitution said, the protection of these faculties, the protection of your property, the things that are yours, is the first object, the first job of government. And when you have enough people within a governmental body with the power of the vote to take that away, they'll do it if government is operating outside of its lane. And that's the gist of that quote. Now, we could spend hours discussing the theological beginnings of where all that thought process came from, but we know what they went to war over. And thankfully, we prevailed in that situation. I think over the years, though, we've lost sight of that. It seems like the further we get away from the Revolutionary War, the easier it is for us to either misunderstand or misrepresent the provisions, even in the U.S. Constitution. But something else that I hope we can get back to here that our founders referred to quite a bit was what we call inherent rights, or Thomas Jefferson may have called them natural rights in the Declaration of Independence. But anyway, enough about my opener. There it is. Fire away. What do you want to talk about this morning?
Oh, well, I was just going to say, too, to follow up on what you said, we had a comment on one of the videos that we did that just blew me away. And usually I've got Michael and I have some kind of anti-property tax screed somewhere in our video for the day. And some guy actually made a comment on the video and said, "It's not your property. You don't own any property. There is no such thing as, literally the communist manifesto about property, right? And the whole WEF, you'll own nothing and you'll love it, that kind of thing." And I was absolutely shocked that somebody would, I don't know, come out and actually say that. And then, of course, I gave him I wrote like a 4-inch paragraph about why you are wrong.
Well, is he?
Yes.
Well, let's think. I agree with you, but from a cynical standpoint, is he really wrong? Is your property ever really yours? This is what the entire argument is based on, right? If I'm having to pay a property tax every year just to own land, then is it ever really mine? And so while
in today's time,
that's right. And while I disagree with his position that it's never yours and it never can be yours because it should be, which is our position. It's ours. We bought it. We paid for it. We took the risk on the loan to go get this. And it's silly that someone that's third party to that contract can come take that property through the use of force. And I'll say that, and you'll hear me say the use of force over and over when it comes to governmental actions to seize people's property unjustly.
Let's establish justice and also ensure domestic tranquility, because we're paying our taxes soon and we're not feeling anywhere near tranquil about it.
Quote of the day right there. I'm not feeling real good about it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, so I don't think people understand that part of the reason why the founders came here in the first place was because under King George, under that system, in the European system, you couldn't own your own property. You had to rent it from the king. The king was the one who owned all the property, right?
That's right.
And you had to rent it from that. And they were sick of, toiling and struggling over this property and creating all, and then just to have the ruler of the day go, ping, you're off, go find some other place to go, peon. And they got sick of that. So it would be nice to think that we would not do that here after we left there, so that we didn't have to do that.
Right.
Let me start with something, because this was kind of my argument in the first place. So I'm going to pull this in so everybody can see. Maybe if I can, I'm going to share my screen. I feel like I'm walking through this every time, like it's somehow new to me. I'm such a dork. Okay, so I'm pulling it in. Yes, here it is. Okay, so here is our friend Rep. Steagall. Steagall files bill to eliminate property tax by 2035. Which I don't know why you couldn't just say the next 15 minutes. That doesn't seem like it's that hard to me, but okay, 2035. So
looking for my magic wand here. Good.
And ding, we're done.
Right.
You and don't get me wrong, and nobody should get me wrong. I'm not complaining that you're doing that. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying, to me, and I want to hear this, I want to hear your argument about my argument. Okay, so here's my argument. And don't say, well, that can't possibly be true. Just think of it theoretically, okay? Just give me that one in, okay?
That's another quote we're going to put on the bottom of your tombstone, Jenny.
What? Just think about it theoretically. Okay, but seriously. Okay, so let me look at it like this. If you really wanted to, now I'm just saying theoretically, if you really wanted to, you could reduce your income tax. You could literally find a job that doesn't make, you're not just you're literally getting a job that doesn't make as much money, so you're not paying as much in income tax. Is that right?
That would be true. Or no job.
Okay, now here's my follow-up. How could I do that with my property?
Go buy a less valuable piece of property.
Oh crap. Well, I guess.
Sorry, did I blow the whole thing up?
Kind of, a little, yes, darn it. But you're right. If you want to pay less property taxes, just like you would pay less, theoretically, you can do this. It's true.
But let's run with your point, though, that you're not going to get away from it.
Okay.
I can quit my job. Let's take it to the extreme. I can quit my job and not ever pay income tax, or in some cases, actually get some money back.
Yeah. Or live off the government like a lot of people do.
Right. But if I'm going to live in a home, whether I rent or buy, it doesn't matter where I'm at on the scale as far as my payment goes. I'm going to pay a property tax, even if it's included in the rent that I pay. But I'm paying a property tax. I'll never get away from that. And landlords that aren't collecting the property tax as part of the cost of doing business, I'd like to have a list of those, because but they'd be passing that off to their renters as a cost of living in that apartment. So everybody pays a property tax. You can't get away from that. And what's interesting is, ever since we've introduced property taxes, there's always been a property tax collected on that piece of property, with the exception of the exemptions. And under the model that we have today, there will always be a property tax collected on it. There will never be a time when property taxes are not collected, here again, outside of those few exemptions. So to the point of the person that made the comment that you didn't like, and we talked about, do we really ever own the property, or do we pay a lease to our landlords for this? And is it right? And I would agree with you on that it is not right. And which kind of takes us to the constitutional argument, and the difference between what is considered constitutional and then something that would be considered a violation of our natural rights. Are you ready to go to that?
Go.
Okay. So in the press release that went out yesterday regarding my the elimination of the state income tax, I quoted Article 2, Section 2 in our state constitution, which reads, "All persons have the inherent right to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and the enjoyment of the gains of their own industries." Well, we skip right over that last part. What are the gains of my own industry? What is that? And the other piece that we skip over here is the inherent rights. What is that? First off, we have to recognize that the Constitution itself, our state constitution, which I'm reading directly from, does not
wait. No, put it up like this so everybody can see how stinking thick that book is.
Oh, like this?
Yes.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
Well, and you know what? Just a note,
on.
quick, Jenny. We need to check the link on the Oklahoma.gov website to the state constitution doesn't even work. Like if you go there, if you type in and you go there to, because I was just looking at it, I was going to bring it up. You click it and it just keeps referring back to the same page. So we need to contact somebody and tell them to fix that link.
Yeah, I'll pass that along too. See what's going on there. So I think the first thing that we need to recognize here is that constitutions do not grant rights. They do not grant powers. They recognize them, but they do not grant them. And that's something that we can all agree on. And if we haven't heard that before, if someone in the audience hasn't heard that before, just hit the I believe button on that for me for now, because it's a truth, number one. And then number two, everything else in our Constitution is based on the fact that our rights and powers are not derived from it. Otherwise, the Constitution couldn't be of, by, and for the people. It would be of, by, and for something else, such as the institution of government itself. And that puts us in a really weird conundrum. The second thing that we need to recognize in our state constitution is that our state constitution recognizes inherent rights. And I'd like to go back to the preamble of our Constitution that starts off by saying, invoking the almighty power of God. So where do our inherent rights come from? They come from our Creator. And we find that language in large part in our Declaration of Independence when Thomas Jefferson talked about that. So our state constitution builds upon the principles that Thomas Jefferson talked about in the Declaration of Independence. And when our state constitution recognizes these inherent rights, it's not just the rights to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and the enjoyment of the gains of our own industry. It also recognizes the fact that all political power is inherent in the people. Article 2 Section 1 starts off with that. All, not some, all. I know, really interesting stuff. All right here in the first few pages of the state constitution. So then we have to, the next thing that we need to understand is what the gains of our own industry are. What is this? Well, to put I call it the bluff, the bottom line up front. The gains of my own industry are the things that I trade my time for. If I trade my time for a paycheck, then those are the gains of my own industry. I go to work for something, whatever it is that I work for, those things are mine. And they're not given to me by a system of government, but instead, these faculties, as James Madison called them, and the protection of these faculties being the first object, the first goal, the first job of government is to protect these. Well, that's what this state constitution does in Article 2, Section 2. It's attempting to protect the rights to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, which our founders called our faculties, our intellectual property, the desire to do things with our own property as we wish, those types of things. And then what I do with my own time, the enjoyment of the gains of my own industry. So things like my paycheck are actually off limits to this system of government. So a little bit of history here. Our state constitution was ratified in 1907. The U.S. Constitution was amended to allow Congress to collect a federal income tax in 1913. And we didn't have a federal income tax until then. We didn't have a state income tax or a requirement to file a tax return until 1915. And while I haven't gone back and taken a look at the votes yet, it's likely that the same group of legislators that voted in favor to amend the U.S. Constitution may have been the same group of legislators that voted to invoke a state income tax here in the state of Oklahoma. It's only 2 years worth of difference there. Very likely that was the case. And if none of us were around for the arguments of the federal income tax, but one of the big selling points for it was that it was only temporary. We had some debt that we needed to pay off, and the fastest way that they saw to address that was the collection of a federal income tax. They were wrong.
You mean like temporary, like the OTA tolls, like that kind of temporary?
Temporary is, and we're only going to pay for the road 6 times over, and then
and a caveat to that also, Jay, is that initial one was sold because only the rich were going to pay that initial tax, not the regular common guy.
That's right, and even in statute leading up to 1915 here in the state of Oklahoma, if people wanted to voluntarily pay some sort of property tax, they could, but it was only assessed up to a certain point by the counties. And the same was true with income tax if they earned more than a reported $3,500 or more. So there were a lot of people in the early years of statehood that reported $3,499 worth of income, I'm sure. But hey,
wow, that's such an exact figure.
I know it's really interesting. And the sole purpose, if we remember, according to our own Oklahoma history, the sole purpose of collecting a property tax in the beginning anyway, and some income tax to that extent, was to fund a public education system. That was its purpose. But anyway, I digest.
I totally digest. So let me back up because we've gotten some really good comments, and I hate putting them up when you're actually on a roll because it detracts from what you're saying. So I wanted to put up a couple. So John Boy Stanley says property taxes just from one county to another is unreal. It shows 2 in the roads and right of ways in that county. To me, it's not so much the tax, it's how it's used or not used or misused for those who pay property taxes. And I think that's an excellent point. Yeah,
absolutely. And to looks like Mr. Stanley made that comment. To your point there, I get a lot of questions now on this state income tax elimination bill that I filed this week. How do we make up for the money that we're missing? And we can talk some more about my position on that answer. But one of the things that we need to identify first is fraud, waste, and abuse. And that falls right in line with this gentleman's comment here. How are we spending the taxpayers' dollars? Are we actually doing a good job with that? Are we putting things out to bid like we're supposed to? Or are we getting a lot? So
you mean like the $20 million that we were giving to one advertising agency in the city by the Tourism and Recreation Department? You mean that?
Or the 30 million? Yeah.
Was it 30? It
was 30 million over the last 4 years, $30 million, $125,000 a month
for advertising
in retainer fees, $125,000 a month in retainer fees alone, whether they worked or not. So that's another thing I've got some questions about. And then you've got some other cases like the Swadley situation where there's $17 million, whether we agree with what happened there or not, there's $17 million worth of taxpayers' money that just vanished into thin air. And then there's
but wait a second though. I mean, we should be able to go back and check it because Mrs. Zumwalt was actually paying her husband's firm for that. So you would think that we should be able to check on that money.
That's another issue that I helped with. Yeah. So I've been on the hunt for a lot of fraud, waste, and abuse issues in the state. And over the last 3 years, we've uncovered potentially hundreds of millions of dollars worth of fraud, waste, and abuse. So for me, it kind of deflates the argument against, getting rid of some of these taxes in some way, shape, form, or fashion. And to Mr. Stanley's point again, what are we doing with the money that is being collected, and how responsible is government actually acting with those expenditures? And if anybody's really curious about it, make an effort to go out to the state auditor's website and take a look at how well these audits are going on any of your governmental agencies at any level. Just go take a look. It's not going that well.
No, and our auditor is amazing. So Derek says, what would you tell my 83-year-old dad who owns his property in Prague that he has to choose between? And this is my point, honestly, Jay. I think this is why I'm just like, let's wait on the income tax and let's get the property taxes first. And here's the reason why. It sums it up in Derek's comment. So what do I tell my dad? That he has to choose between insuring his property or paying property taxes? When can he solely own his own property instead of just paying the state to own his property?
Right.
And that is the thing that I get. I mean, we all know I love to be righteously indignant, but that is one thing that I really am righteously indignant about. I can't tell you the number of people on fixed incomes that I've talked to, and they say things like, because insurance, we've had an insurance agent on this program talking about the skyrocketing property insurance in Oklahoma.
Sure.
And so now you've got some guy, 83-year-old dude on a fixed income who's going, so if the house burns down, I guess I don't rebuild because I have to pay the state their due. No, not okay with that.
Yeah, exactly. And this comes back around to who actually owns the property, who took the risk. And it's these individuals. So I watched my grandparents deal with this out in Brentwood, Tennessee, back in the mid '90s. And this gentleman that sent this comment in is spot on. You know, we see people getting taxed off of their own properties, especially in their retirement years. How do we move these people off their property? Well, we raise taxes. Municipalities are really bad about this and simply proposing an additional ad valorem tax on properties when most people that move to a retirement community are there and they're there on a fixed income and they bought what they could afford. They didn't buy a piece of property so that they could spend their kids' inheritance on paying property taxes. They bought this
so that we could have a giant new arena that we don't even need to pay for because the basketball team can afford to pay it for it themselves.
Well, there's that too, but it's.
I'm just going to keep a record of all.
Sure. I'm
going to edit them all out.
I was not a big fan of that either. And by the way, my degree's in economics, and when I even saw the economic professors at OU get on television and give a report of, hey, this buying a new arena for the Thunder or investing at this level, that's a bad idea. There's no way that Oklahoma City comes out ahead on this. And I'm like, where have you been on all these other economic issues? I really needed you in my corner on that too, because you're not wrong. But anyway.
Here's another comment that I liked because it's true. I love Dana. Part of the agenda is nothing can be happy. Right. Yes, it's very true. And then Wendy says, why do we pay a bank instead of the state then for our property? Good point, Wendy. The way this is set up is insanity. Fix our elections and we'll find out what people really want in the state. How did you work that in? How did you work elections in, Wendy, to property tax?
That's what Wendy's going to do. She's going to work them in there.
Well done, babe.
That's her vein. Yeah.
Good job.
She's working hard on fixing elections. She is.
I mean, she does have a point. And what I'd like to get to next is when you and I talked over the phone, and this is where I want to go. You said that property taxes, and I'll be honest, Jay, I didn't have time to look it up. You said property taxes were enshrined in the state constitution, and so we'd have to take them out of the constitution. Can you explain that so we understand where we need to go with that? Because I think a lot of the people clearly who are on here this morning have the same ideas that we all do, is it's got to be eliminated and we need to knock it off. So, we're all for getting rid of the state income tax. And, of course, we'll help you. We're not going to fight you on that. But we need to get the other thing moving as well. So how do we do that?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And I'm really glad that we had this discussion. Of course, that's what got us here this morning. There's a lot wrapped up in this discussion.
Wendy says, let's get that petition going.
Yeah, well, we'll come back to that in a second, Wendy. Yeah, so our state constitution does allow for the collection for the county to collect property taxes, and they're the only entity that's allowed to collect those property taxes, with the exception of some municipalities can do that as well. But
And
they
you
have
did
to
make
take
a great point to me, and I want to make that point again because you said it, but I want to make it more succinctly. The state doesn't take your property taxes.
right,
They're not charging you property taxes.
Right.
It's the county, and like you said, some municipalities, but mainly the county
right.
that does that through the county assessor's office.
That's right. And if municipalities want to collect a property tax, they have to take that to a vote of the people. And it's only applicable, obviously, within the boundaries of that municipality. So the difference between that and the way state income taxes are protected here is that state income taxes were instituted statutorily. So what we're looking at here in this piece of legislation is something that the legislature can actually do and have an effect immediately, whether it's a gradual approach to eliminating the taxes like what I've proposed in the bill, and we can talk about that some more in a bit. We can adjust state income taxes statutorily. What we can't do as a body of legislators is change the Constitution. We can't do that directly. However, and there's more to come on this, I want you to put a pin in this thought. We're going to come back to this hopefully at a later time. But what could happen is that legislators could introduce a bill that would take to the vote of the people either an adjustment to the property tax constitutional provisions and or a replacement type mechanism in some sense to get us away from paying property taxes so that what we buy is ours and stays ours. So, I mean, that is something that the legislature can do is take that to a vote of the people, but they got to work that through the process like they do a regular bill. The other way to get this done is through, like what Wendy said, was through a petition. I got that question yesterday from a young lady up in Osage County. She was asking, well, you know, if you didn't eliminate state income tax through legislative means, is this something that the people could do themselves, or should they do that? And of course, I responded with, the people always have the prerogative under the provisions of our Constitution to change the Constitution however they want. And I encourage them to do that, get active in that process. And if that's something that they want to pursue, they should go pursue that. As a legislature, as a body of legislators, we have the ability to fix this issue with the state income tax. And if we were to take a look at this as our income being a piece of our property, and it's ours, it's the gains of my own industry. This is my property. Then we should take action on it. But one of the biggest reasons the legislature should take action on this, and the reason it's so important to me, is we all took an oath to support, obey, and defend the Constitution. And that is the mechanism owned by the people.
Everybody took that oath? Are you sure there weren't some people that did this behind their back?
Well, I wasn't watching everybody. But I mean, you know me, almost 23 years in the military, took the oath multiple times. And now I'm in my fourth term at the state house. So I've taken that oath at least 4 times just in the last few years.
Well, I didn't say we didn't believe you, Jay.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of what I'm getting at. I introduced the bill, and I'm working hard to get this done because it's the right thing to do. Yeah. It's a step we should take, and we need to fix this. And just because we've done it for the last 100+ years doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. We need to right this wrong and leave more money in the hands of the people that actually earned it and let them spend it.
Well, Jay, it seems like it's such common sense. I mean, what is the actual opposition to repealing the property tax or the income tax? I mean, why is it such a hard deal?
That's a great question, Michael. I'll tell you, last year, so this isn't the first time I filed the state income tax elimination bill. I filed it 2 other times. I filed it last year during regular session. Then I filed it the previous year during a special session that we had up at the Capitol to actually deal with state income that were introduced And if you remember, the purpose of that special session was to reduce or eliminate state income taxes. And that special session was called by the governor himself. And I was the only one that introduced a bill that put us on a glide path to 0% state income tax like the governor had asked for. But I couldn't even get the bill out of committee.
Gosh, I'd never heard of that happening before.
No, that's never happened before. Well, hopefully we'll see a different result this year. But to answer your question, Michael, the biggest there's been two things that I'd like to address as far as what the pushback has been on it. And the number one concern that I've had brought to me by my colleagues is, well, how are you going to pay for all of this government? That's the question that they ask. And my response is, well, how much government do you think you need to fund? Because I can identify lots of fraud, waste, and abuse. I can identify offices that we don't need to be paying for. There's a lot of things that we do that we don't need to be doing. So that's just money that we shouldn't be collecting to begin with. But I said, however, when it comes to the state income tax, it doesn't, until we can swallow this really big pill, it doesn't matter what the other arguments are. We have to understand that state income taxes directly violate Article 2, Section 2 in our state constitution. And until we understand that, then it doesn't really matter how much money we have in our coffers. It doesn't matter how much in services we need to provide. If we don't understand that we're operating outside of our legal constitutional limits, then the rest of that argument doesn't matter. But by reintroducing this bill, we get to have these conversations on, okay, what are these services that we really don't need to be providing? What are the things that we don't need to be paying for? What are the areas of fraud, waste, and abuse that we can identify and cut out the grifting, for example? We mentioned some of that earlier. What are those areas? And then we understand that the gap really isn't that big. But here's the other thing. Like I mentioned earlier, my degree is in economics. And just because we cut state income tax doesn't mean that money disappears into thin air, just vanishes. What this means is that you've got employees and employers now that both are not having to pay into the state income tax coffers. Instead, what they get to do as employees is keep that money in their paycheck and go spend it in the economy however they want to. Guess what sales generate? Sales revenue, sales tax revenue. By leaving that money in the hands of employers, you give them the option now of either providing raises or hiring additional personnel or whatever the case is. Those people go buy things, and that generates sales tax revenue. So this creates velocity of money, and the more times that money is handled throughout a fiscal year, the more sales tax revenue it generates. So we want that money to end up in more cash registers. We want it to end up in more checking accounts. You see where I'm going with this?
Oh,
we
totally.
want money to move. You can't let money move. You actually pump the brakes on the economy by taxing people into oblivion through things like state income tax and property tax, because that money doesn't move through the economy itself. It gets stifled out, and that's outside of my personal thoughts of these types of taxes actually enslave the public. I'm just talking about from the economic standpoint here. It doesn't make any sense.
Do you mind if I interject in some of the comments?
Yeah. Well, I was just going to make a point real quick on that economic point anyway, Jay. I mean, if you don't have property tax and you don't have income tax, think of the amount of business and the amount of people that you're going to attract into the state. Especially your property values are going to go up because now you don't have that aspect of property tax on top of it. I mean, it's just from an economic standpoint, it's such a no-brainer to do that, to promote, the actual article, what did you say? Article 2, Section 2?
That's right. That's right.
Okay. So I want to throw this one up because it's a great one. Great one. Me and John Boy, we're like this. He's great. Yet the state or county gives tax breaks to huge corporate companies who have more money than the people. And when the tax breaks expire, they file for another one or then leave to go to another county or state. That, I think, is the I can't say it in a nice way, so I'm struggling. That is the poop sandwich that we're in the middle of right now. I mean, it's bad enough for you to tell me I can't own my own property, I can't own my own income. It's bad enough for you to do that, but it's worse when you then take my money and you give it to Canoe. Give it to Canoe, an electric car maker, which basically has constantly struggled to stay in business. Why? Because electric cars are stupid. But yet we gave millions of dollars to a tax incentive. Same thing we've been doing for windmills. Same thing we've been doing for solar farms. This makes me so angry. My head is going to explode. So we've got some 83-year-old in Prague who's trying to figure out how to afford insurance on his house or his property taxes so he doesn't get thrown out of his house. But by God, we had to fund Canoe.
Right. Hey, can we pull that comment back up? I want to provide a little bit of clarification on here. Okay, so there's a difference between a tax break and a tax incentive. The incentives that we generate are the handouts of the tax dollars. A break doesn't do that. That's the lack of collection. So that's sorry. We need to understand the difference there, because we're either as a state collecting revenue or we're not, depending on how this piece of legislation is written. Just like the difference between what we can do I'd say this is an important thing for us to understand, because it really is just like the difference between what the legislature can do as far as income taxes or property taxes go. It's that big of a difference. I've never voted in favor of a tax incentive that utilizes the collection of your taxes and my taxes and hands that out to someone else. But there's a really good reason for that. There's zero, and I mean none. It does not exist. There are no studies that show that tax incentives boost an economy. Yeah. None, not a one. A couple of years ago, we were entertaining the idea of bringing Panasonic into the state up in Pryor. You remember all this?
No, I do.
And Panasonic was going to bring 4,500 jobs into the local economy. No, they're not. They're going to pull 4,500 jobs away from mom and pop shops in Pryor and other places. They're not bringing 4,500 people into the state of Oklahoma to go work at Panasonic. That's not what they were doing. They were coming here to take advantage of the lower wages, the lower cost of energy, all of those things, which tells you that they were going to recruit jobs from other employers. That's not job creation. That's job transfer. So number one, government cannot create jobs, nor do those incentives actually work. They asked for, it was an astronomical amount of money for us. And we're in this argument between Oklahoma and Kansas on who's going to get this deal. And I said, let Kansas have it. Yeah. Why even enter into the debate here? This is not a good deal for us. Plus, what we're doing is we're utilizing the force of government to collect taxes to hand out to another company, like Mr. Stanley here is pointing out. In this instance, that's not a tax break. That's a tax incentive. A tax break would be much different. There were some tax breaks that were written into the bill, but there were actually incentives to come here too. There were cash handouts there. And then on the tax break side, there were some ad valorem that was not going to be collected over the next 20 years. So there's a difference here in what those things do for us. But most importantly, we need to understand that a property is property. It doesn't really matter who owns it, whether it's an individual or a company or whoever it is. Property tax is property tax. So when we start talking about eliminating property tax, even these huge corporate companies that come in and buy property and build huge facilities on it, we're talking about exempting them from property taxes as well.
But see, to me, that's well, because we have like 77 comments.
Yeah, you need to put Tracy's up there too.
So hang on a second. Wendy, I can't even remember what we were talking about, but she cracked me up because she said, yes, let's do it that way. Much easier for the legislators to do it that way. I'm pretty sure Oklahomans want the property tax eliminated rather than open primaries. See what I did there?
Yeah. I don't disagree with Wendy's comment there.
Margie says, yeah, property tax first, income tax later. This was a good one. Amy said, the COVID mess really highlighted the need to do away with property taxes. As I watched people lose their jobs for refusing an injection, I realized that even if they owned their own home, they could lose even if they weren't, they could lose even that if they weren't able to pay their property taxes. And again, this is why I advocate for property taxes before income taxes, Jay, is for this exact reason that Amy talks about. So what if I do lose my income? But if I lose my income, I lose my house too. But at least if I don't have to rent my house from the government, I can stay in my house if I own it. Theoretically, while I work for another job, look for another job. That's not what's gonna. I mean, do you follow the logic there? That's why I say property taxes before income tax.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the position that we need to eliminate property taxes. But here again, I'm going to do what I can do as a legislator.
But if there is a way, like you guys did with 833, wasn't it 833 or 803, whatever it was, it was a change to the Constitution, but you guys put this through the legislative process and then ended up putting it on the ballot. I don't know why we couldn't even conceive of doing something like that this year. Why would it be that hard? I mean, I'm sure there's some shell bills out there somewhere.
Yeah, it's never an issue of how hard is it to file a bill. The issue is how hard is it to get it moved through both chambers and then to the governor's desk to sign. But here again, and I don't disagree with, and I'll say it over and over and over, I don't disagree with doing away with property taxes, and we should. That is going to have to be taken to a vote of the people, and I can't make that happen on my own. The governor, even if we were to get that bill through, the governor's going to have to pick a date at some future time to do that, and I'm willing to work towards that. But what I can do right now is work on a bill, file on a bill statutorily to eliminate state income tax. And we have to understand these two things are both ours. I don't see any difference.
Right.
In the identification of what property taxes are and income taxes are. They're both mine.
Right. So January Lisa says, Michael, it's a socialistic new age belief that we can't own anything. The earth is our mother and we can't own her, blah, blah, blah. Combine this with a slob, which is true. Robert says, one bill for state question to eliminate property tax, another contingency bill to fund county through sales tax or something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to Mr. Scott's point there, counties do collect a small portion of sales taxes already.
Yes, true. Mm-hmm. Having come from a county or a city that does that. We need more reps with this vision. Cut the size of government, so you get an high five for that. It's legalized theft and it's unlawful. Another one. Logical common sense in government. It's like an oxymoron. Yes, Dana, it is.
I know.
Yet they removed state food tax. That money will be made up somewhere. Will it be done with property tax? So everyone eats, yet not everyone owns property they rent. Right. Is that not a penalty placed on a select few? Again, good point.
Well, Mr. Stanley, that's a good point. We were able to remove the state portion of the grocery tax, but here again, the state does not collect a property tax.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, we wouldn't be even able to collect a property tax here again without a change to the Constitution, which would require a vote of the people. And I don't see the people voting in favor of raising their own property taxes.
No, but you know what just hit me though too, Jay, is basically it would be this. Any bill that you would file would be this: to repeal the section of the Oklahoma Constitution that allows the collection of property tax. That's all you'd have to do, right?
Yes, and there is an author filing that bill, and like I said earlier, we'll put a pin in that and come back to that at a future date. I don't want you to give up on that idea.
Okay, so then Denise says, and I'm with Denise on this one, demand the wind solar industry to pay equal gross production taxes as the oil and natural gas industry and stop coddling them. I totally agree with that.
Denise, I hate production taxes. I do. I hate production taxes. You get penalized for producing. That here again, it's like you get penalized on your paycheck. I hate that.
Well, and I hate that too, but I see what Denise is saying. If you're going to tax one of these energy industries, but you're not going to tax the other ones because you're busy giving them money, whether it's the federal level or the state level, no, that's a big no.
Sure. Very inequitable, right?
Right. I mean, if we're all going to, if you're going to ding us all, ding us all. The challenge, they challenge the taxes. That's true. The wind industries have challenged the ad valorem taxes in their counties, and they're getting a really nasty reputation for doing that. Tracy says yes, Jenny. So I'm throwing that on because whatever that was about me.
Yeah. I talked to Steve this morning.
And then Robert said, "Oh, canoe. Now we're talking government, economic development, crony capitalism." Yeah. Absolutely, it is crony capitalism, and I know you agree with that.
Yep, 100%.
Jay says they do the both in the same cases. I'm not sure. I'm sorry, John. We got backwards there, and I don't remember what that was about. Property taxes are killing small businesses too. That's right, Tracy.
Yeah,
that's exactly right. So let me throw this at you because I'm just curious how you feel about. Oh my goodness, people are upset. I can't get through all of the comments and the questions. There's so many of them. We really hit on. Hey, Jay, you got in on a pretty big conversation here. I don't think we've ever not been able to get any of them on. But I'll put this one on too, because this was about me.
Hey, if you want your comment to hit the screen quickly, just
make Jenny, it about me.
Just tag Jenny in there one way or another.
The green energy scam is a big one. So Amy says, is the property tax collected by counties for education separate from the education budget set? This is a good question. Set by the legislature? What are some ways that the counties, education, sheriff, etc., could be funded outside of property? Good question, Amy Jackson. Property taxes. Would that fall to the state? Just trying to think of things that would need to be covered in a state petition. Good question.
Yeah, Amy's obviously forward thinking there in knowing that we do have some services that we need to be able to provide as a system of government, whether it's at the state, county, municipal, or school district, as provided for in the Constitution. So I like where this question is going. And yes, Amy, there are several different ideas on how to fund government at all levels outside of either a state income tax or a property tax. And other states have done this and are looking at it too. One of the models looks at a consumption tax, which basically puts into place a system of, if you don't want to pay tax on something, you don't buy it. Which is a great system to operate under. I think it gets everybody, whether they're from Oklahoma or traveling through. The minute that they buy something, they're putting into the system that provides the services that we're all enjoying collectively. So yes, I love where this question is going.
As your favorite person, well, probably one of them. For sure. The only way to have fair taxes is to have voluntary taxes. And the only voluntary tax, Jay, is a use tax.
A use tax or consumption tax or something.
Well,
like that.
And another note on that consumption tax, Jay. I mean, you see the people, the more wealth people have, the better tax people they can afford. So as you go up the ladder, I mean, you've got, and it's always been, just kind of that the rich don't pay their fair share. Whether they do or not, there are tax loopholes in the system to allow them to not pay as much tax, and that a consumption would basically eliminate that also.
Yeah, and I love this thought process too. Let's think about it. If we eliminate state income tax, then most of us won't need to file a tax return.
Well, that would probably be a whole department that would have to disappear, Jay.
Oh man, we're shrinking government at that point, right? So. anyway, I love everything about eliminating the state income tax, and that it saves the state money. It saves consumers money. It gives us the ability to move towards more of a consumption or sales tax type mechanism for funding government altogether. And to Julia's point, it becomes voluntary at that point.
Right.
You know, in large part. So there's obviously a lot of things to work through, and I wanted to make sure, if we can fast forward to talking about a little bit of the bill and what it does right quick.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Go ahead.
So I noticed some of the comments were like, "Hey, let's eliminate this tax right now. Why can't we do this?" And you even mentioned that, "Hey, let's get this done in the next 15 minutes." I introduced the bill, and if I had a magic wand, you know, this is what I would do. But there's some other things that are going to have to be addressed in order for us to do this. The bill itself doesn't directly deal with any of these other issues, but what it does do is it provides a mechanism to put us on a glide path to 0% income tax, and it's all in that section of the law. The other things that we're going to have to deal with here really fall under the tax reform umbrella. How do we fund? What are the mechanisms now that we're going to utilize to fund some of these other services that we provide as a governmental system? There's a lot of things that could be tied to the collection of income tax at the state level, and a lot of a large portion of that comes out of our general revenue fund and then divvied out to different agencies, departments, things like that. But what I did with the bill was I basically did two things. One, the bill would collapse all of the tax brackets into one tax bracket. So everybody would be paying the same rate. And then over the next 10 years, we take that rate, divide it by 10, and by that small amount, it would reduce by that amount every year over the next 10 years, eventually getting us to zero. Could we fast track that? Absolutely. The idea here, though, is to allow time for the state legislature to work through some tax reform issues, reshuffle. And I said this last night on KOCO, but kind of reshuffle the deck here, if you will, and identify areas of fraud, waste, and abuse, services that we don't need to be providing anymore, offices that we don't need to be paying for employment for anymore. Government is not a jobs program. So if we don't need the services, then we need to let some people go, and that's okay. There are plenty of other jobs out there available. But we have to understand, first and foremost, that as a body of legislators, we have to be good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars, and that includes how we collect them.
Well, I'm all for it. You got me. I just want to see property tax at least addressed at the same time. Julia says, your income is your property as well. Yes, that's true. Let's get the low hanging fruit first and continue to advocate for people owning everything. To the government, you will own nothing and be happy. I like that.
Yeah,
I'm with that. Sales tax is usually the remedy for the elimination of other taxes. Yay for smaller government. Having too many comments to post is a great problem to have. I completely agree. Texas. Now this is a point. I mean, and I see what Robert is saying here. Texas has no income tax and pays high property taxes, and they have weird property tax that we can talk about another time. But this is where Oklahoma is headed. Nobody will convince me otherwise. And I do think, Jay, that's part of the reason why I'm so on, okay, let's do what you're doing. I'm all for you doing that, but also at the same time, let's do, the other. Let's try to get a repeal, because my thought was this, and as usual, argue with me as necessary. My thought on this is, if you repeal it from the Constitution, now I'm trying to think this out. So right now, the counties impose property taxes because they can, because the Constitution allows them to do so. Am I right so far?
So far.
Okay. So if you repeal the section of the state constitution that allows them to do that, that doesn't say that they can't collect taxes in another way.
Well, if they were to impose another tax, they would have to take that to a vote of the people. They can't just make up taxes and fines and penalties out of thin air. None of us have the authority to do that unless it's specifically granted in the Constitution. And something very important for everybody to understand. If we can pull Mr. Scott's comment back up, I want to
absolutely
comment on that too. But
sure,
counties operate on a permissive basis. They can only do what the state statute or what the Constitution allows them to do directly. They have no wiggle room to operate in the gray area. So county lobbyists come to us every year asking for additional permission, even legislative permission, if you will, to do other things or adjust the rules or policies that govern county government. I mean, we have committees in both chambers that deal with municipal and county governmental systems for addressing legislative needs for those specific entities. I got some great news for Mr. Scott. Even the state of Texas is looking at ways to get away from property taxes. And there are other states that are doing this too. Nebraska, I believe, is taking a look at a way to get rid of both as well. And I understand what Mr. Scott is saying here, but here again, the state doesn't collect a property tax. So we wouldn't have a mechanism at the state level of raising property taxes anyway. But these are two different, we call them revenue streams. They're not really revenue streams, but they're tax streams. There's the state income tax, and then there's the property taxes, and those streams don't really cross. So it's not a.
It sounds like Ghostbusters. Don't cross the
streams. Yeah, that's really not how our tax system is set up to operate, and it's not really how the flow of our monies work. I understand the sentiment. I'm not going to poo-poo on the comment here, but it does bring to the surface some misunderstanding with some folks about how our tax system is structured, and it is very convoluted. It's not easy to follow, and that's why I even said in the article we need to address some tax reform issues as well. That way, our tax system is easier to understand and easier to operate, and we can streamline it and increase efficiency, reduce costs, all that good stuff when we do that.
So Robert said, let's not forget we cut taxes during Fallon. Within a year or two, we had a budget emergency, which is I think ended up with things like extra cigarette taxes amongst other things. And I think Robert's comment is a great comment. I keep looking over at Rumble just to make sure we're not getting comments that I'm not seeing over there. So that's why I keep doing that. Yeah. I see what Robert was saying in his original question, and I see what you're saying, Jay. I do understand what you're saying, but I think what Robert is saying is that if we don't attack both of these issues, then what's going to end up happening is that property taxes will start creeping up to make up for things, because we still appropriate. And I think that's one thing that people don't understand that you could shed some light on too, is appropriations versus ad valorem taxes, because we pay the vast majority of our property tax dollar goes to our schools, whatever district we're in, right? And our libraries and health department and, roads and all those other things. But that's the majority of where that comes. But then the legislature appropriates money to education also. And then they also get federal funds. And then they also get grants from the feds. And then, so it's not like education isn't funded in 97,412 different ways. It's not just property taxes.
Well, I want to remind everyone here that in statute, counties are restricted to the rate at which they can increase property taxes every year.
Oh, fair enough.
So 3%.
It's something pretty low. It's below 5. It's either 5% a year or lower. I can't remember what it is exactly. But I say it's low. It's not low if you've got a high value piece of property. 5% on anything's I'd love for my
Or you're
savings
on a
account to
fixed
be
income.
paying 5%. Right. Sometimes that 5% will increase. I don't want to make light of it, but for people in those situations, but the county is restricted by only being able to increase that rate by so much every year. So property taxes by design can't shoot up. There's a restriction on that already.
Yeah, fair enough.
Well, I do have an issue there with just my own background. I do a lot of investments and money management, things like that. A major issue for me in this whole deal with like our house property tax, we're basically paying tax and on an unrealized gain. The house value keeps going up. It's all unrealized. If you did that in any other investment or any other thing, you'd be literally just laughed out of whatever. But we accept that on the property side. And then what happens if I don't pay my taxes? They're going to sell my house at the very bottom dollar they can possibly get just to pay the taxes. So to me, that whole side is just, it just doesn't even make sense that we have. Well, it does make sense in a way because they have to constantly elevate those property values to justify the bonds across the board in one way or another, because they can't keep funding these bonds if they don't have future property values just going through the roof. So it's a whole system, in my opinion, that's just completely, I don't even know the right word, but I don't think it's right that I have to pay property value based on an unrealized gain constantly.
Right. And really what we're talking about here is a situation where Colonel Sanders is babysitting your chickens. And I don't disagree, Michael. If we were to sit down and really put pencil to paper, let's talk about a 30-year loan or a 20-year loan. I'm fortunate enough to, I've got 12 more payments on my house, and we're done. We financed 15 years, and then hopefully I'll own that outright. But let's take a look over, the last 20 years worth of house payments. I've also been paying insurance. I've been paying ad valorem tax. And if we were to take the value of my home today, subtract out what it is that I've paid for in taxes, what I paid for in insurance, what I've paid in interest on the loan to do all of this, and compare that and adjust for inflation, how much did I really make on, if I were to sell at home today compared to the price I paid for it 20 years ago, and I bought it new, how much did I actually gain?
Yeah. Well, the inflation alone would really knock that back. But I agree 100%. You don't have much gain in that probably at all.
Right. Yet like you said earlier, the valuation keeps going up. So what is it that's driving the valuation? And I could not agree more that it's really not the market driving the price of these houses up as much as it is the system of government that's evaluating the tax rate at which you're going to pay on that house. Now, if I sell that house today, the ad valorem taxes get caught up with the new buyer.
Yeah.
Right. So we understand that there's obviously a gap there, and that's why counties typically raise your property taxes at the max rate that they're legally allowed to do every year, so that when that house sells, the new buyer picks up that ad valorem at the higher valuation of the home, and that puts that property tax now on a different trajectory, if you will, at a different rate. And at some point, that's going to be unsustainable. People aren't going to be able to buy homes or afford even the payments on them. I don't know how kids today. My wife and I got married when we were in our really young 20s. I don't know how kids today would, in that situation, would be able to afford going out and buying a home without amassing a huge amount of debt, and then being able to offset it with either a good job or investments in or like things such as simple as a 401k plan. How do we offset all this? Because you're going to pay capital gains tax on every bit of it. Where does the individual today step off? And this is really in your wheelhouse, Michael. Where does the individual today in their young 20s start off with on a pathway to amassing wealth of their own if we're paying property taxes and income taxes and everything else that goes along with that just to survive.
Yeah, it's unattainable. You can't do it in today's time. I've had many talks. I've got 5 kids. My oldest is 19. I said, when I was 19, I was out on my own. I was making, $10,000 a year. I could live. I could afford a place, buy my own car, pay for gas, pay for all my own stuff. I could be completely independent, making $10,000 a year when I was 19 years old. You can't do that now. You can't even have a base job, just a base, $25,000 job. You can't have it. Can't work in today's time.
Right.
No, and it's not fair. It's not. And at some point, what'll end up happening is it's just going to collapse on itself anyway if we don't start making some steps to get that under control. And it's interesting that Michael brought this up, and I would imagine you're not nuts about this either, Jay, but you think about, we've had 2 school systems in Oklahoma who have been embroiled in multi-million-dollar lawsuits because of sexual and sex abuse and physical abuse, physical abuse in Kingfisher and sex abuse. And I'm not remembering where it is, Michael. Wetumpka. And so what ends up happening is those huge, each of the people in those lawsuits were awarded multi-million-dollar damages. The school doesn't have its own money.
Dana says Ninnekah, not Wetumpka.
Okay, Ninnekah. Thank you. The school doesn't have its own money. It's a government entity. Government doesn't have its own money. It's not like the lady, remember she thought Obama had like his own money. The government doesn't have any money they don't steal from us first. So if that happens, then you're ending up, and this is happening in Kingfisher County, where their property taxes are now going to go way up because of something that the public school did that resulted in a multi-million-dollar lawsuit that's now being spread over everybody in that county. I know that we don't like to talk about fairness because it's not the same as justice, for example, but that's just simply not fair. I don't know how you could ever make that out to be fair.
Yeah, I don't either. It reminds me of one of Reagan's statements about individual responsibility. And we seem to have lost sight of that. And we want to punish the masses instead. And we do that through, the spreading out of any kind of collections like this in these cases. I haven't read the deal on Kingfisher County. It'd be interesting to take a look at how they're doing that. Because here again, the county is restricted by, the rate at which they can raise property.
All you have to do is Google Kingfisher. It comes up. And the last thing I read was an article on it, I think from Fox KOKH. Yeah. And they said that basically the county assessor was figuring out how to, because there's something about a sinking fund, and Kendall Sacchieri, one of our new senators, she's great at explaining that because she was a county assessor before she became a state senator.
Sure.
And she is great about explaining all of that. But, that's just another, Nian says they fired 21 employees. Which, are we talking about Ninnekah? Are we talking about, which one are we talking about? And then Wendy had a comment that didn't have to do with elections, Jay. Not just that, Jenny, the EPS system had to defend their violations of parental and student rights. As Michael well knows, it's ridiculous. They use our tax money for their lawyers, and that's just so true. So Nian says Kingfisher is the one who fired 21 employees.
Well, think about, look at Stillwater, Jenny. Stillwater spent $50,000 in the school district on,
fighting the First Amendment.
Yeah.
I'll tell you something else that I fought against pretty pretty strongly up the Capitol was the acceptance and expenditures of these economic stimulus plans that rolled out from the federal government over the last few years. You guys remember the ARPA funds and things like that. And it's in this vein. My concern here was, and I brought this up to my colleagues to be fair. I said the same thing to them. I said, my concern here is that, number one, the feds don't actually have this money. They've printed it off.
Correct. Bingo.
This is fiat money, and they're passing this out. $1.9 trillion in the ARPA package alone, and we ended up with $1.9 billion of it here in Oklahoma. Well, we didn't actually end up with $1.9 billion. What we ended up with was $1.9 billion worth of federal debt, disguised as $1.9 billion worth of economic stimulus money. But it came with strings attached. If we didn't spend the money the way the feds wanted us to spend their money, then when the audits started happening, if they find this out, then they're going to start clawing this money back. Well, the clawback provisions are very, very scary in situations like this for this reason. They gave us fiat money.
Right.
But when they claw it back, they collect actual tax dollars. It comes out of our hide. We can't print that money. After we spend that money, the only way for us to pay that back is with actual tax dollars. That is a very scary situation to be in. And that was the biggest concern that I had with all of it was, we're giving this money to governmental entities that are having a tough time passing audits as it is.
Wow.
If we don't play by their rules and they decide to claw back these provisions, we have to pay that back with actual tax dollars.
I never even thought of that, Jay. That's horrible. So Amy says, did Rep Steagall ever get to explain his bill?
Amy, I like you. I need you to come down to the Capitol.
Wait, did you get? Is she a plant for you, Jay? Amy Jackson.
No.
Keep Jenny on track.
Jenny, sometimes people just like what I'm doing. Let's just go with that. All right. Amy, that's a great question. I did get to introduce the bill last year in the Finance Committee, but I had to make an agreement. I'm gonna be open here about what happened last year. The bill wasn't going to go anywhere, and it was last year's bill, and I can't remember the number. It was like 3056 or something like that. It doesn't matter. But the chairman of the Finance Committee was kind enough to let me introduce the bill in committee and explain it along with the constitutional reasons why I was filing the bill. And he allowed me some leniency to explain my position on it. 3058 was the bill last year, I guess. And I had to make an agreement just to get the bill heard in committee. And the agreement was I would be able to come in and make the introduction, make my argument for it. But I was going to lay it over. And I was fine with that, because what it did is it highlighted the fact that we needed to have this conversation to begin with. None of our income tax bills made it through the entire system. And a large portion, or a large reason that didn't happen, was because there was a lot of hang up over on the Senate side with tax cuts to begin with. Even the grocery tax was a huge hurdle for us to get over. So I thought I would take the win where I could, at least get the argument going. And I think that may be a good reason why it's actually polling as high as it is. Man, I don't know who wrote the ad that you have up on the screen, but my name is spelled at least two different ways in that ad, in that article.
Hey, that is your House of Representatives news and media at its finest.
I'll talk
Maybe
to our
there's some
media
jobs you need to eliminate.
I think we just need to visit with them about the spelling of mine. Anyway, not that big a deal. One of the top polling issues this election cycle was actually the elimination of the state income tax. Over 70% of those who were polled here in Oklahoma supported the idea of eliminating the state income tax, which puts a lot of wind in our sail to move in this direction, to start ridding the state of these types of bills, or these types of taxes.
Well, if it went to something like a petition or something like that, Jay, what kind of numbers are we talking about here that we would need to facilitate something like that?
So it'd be based on one of our previous elections. Is it our? You're gonna Wendy might have to chime in here on how many votes we'd need or which elections it is. I think it's based on the last gubernatorial race.
Yes, it is.
Okay, and
no, presidential. Last
is it
presidential.
Okay, whatever it is, there's a certain percentage of that we'd have to be able to collect signatures on, and then get it filed with the state Secretary of State's office. They validate it, and of course, run it through the rest of the system. If the people wanted to take that up, then that's a good cause to champion. And of course, like I stated earlier, that's their prerogative to do so, and it's their constitution. If they want to change it, they should absolutely do what they want to do there to make it their own.
Well, I mean, we're definitely going to put this out and, everything that we have and, do our videos and get all of this out because, we absolutely support you in doing this because, certainly we don't like government any. Okay, well, I'm just going to stop there. I'll just stop there. We did have a comment that I do think it is an interesting one because we're going to have to close out. I'm sure you can't stay on for like 6 hours today. Alan says, how does a city's use of TIF, how do cities use TIF that eliminate property taxes for developers that want to develop property, while the average citizen has to pay taxes on property when the developers get the benefit? And I'm not, Alan, I'm having trouble kind of parsing out what you're getting at, but TIFs are city. They're done by municipality, and they create a different tax district for a specific district in that municipality.
Right.
And so I'm not sure what we're thinking. Do you mean that does that attach to the property taxes? And I would imagine it does. It has to, doesn't it, Jay?
I think he's asking, how is this right?
Oh, okay. Well, obviously it's not.
If he's not, Alan, chime in there. But here's another good example of a tax break. So the city wouldn't be collecting property taxes, right? So we're not giving, a TIF doesn't give that developer tax dollars. They give them a tax break over a period of time.
That's right.
Okay.
Thanks, Jay. Yes.
So just making sure
No, you're right.
All right. So I agree with if the premise is how is this right? I agree with that. We either all are paying it or none of us should be. And to Alan's point, in a way, with TIFs, we kind of create a special class of people, if you will, even though they're usually developers, because they get a tax break when everybody else doesn't.
Yeah.
We do the same thing with income tax. There are some groups of people in the state that are exempt from paying state income tax.
Yeah.
Well, what happened to equal protection under the law?
Right.
There are some people that are exempt from paying property taxes. What happened to equal protection under the law?
No.
So, we've got to figure out a way to rectify these issues. And of course, the easiest way is for government to get out of the areas that it's not supposed to be in anyway.
So Wendy's looking it up because she actually wasn't sure either. Robert says City of Glenpool, City of Glenpool knew 20 years ago they needed to replace their sewer system. They blew the money on a $5 million TIF for a Mark Allen Chevy service road and $10 million on a still today empty conference center. That, good night, then begs the federal government for $20 million ARPA funds to replace their sewer system, all while levying a 10% sales tax.
Wow.
That's ridiculous.
That's
I think
creative.
Robert thought you need to fire every single member of the city of Glenpool municipal government.
That's pretty creative.
I would run them out of town on a rail.
You know,
Alan
Jenny, if I was in that situation, I'd almost try to file like a claim against their negligent bond. You know, they're insured up to a certain amount for negligence. I mean, that may be an option for them.
There you go, Robert. Alan says 20 years of non-property taxes that developers get to break on. Oh, I see what he's saying. Do you see what he's saying now, Jay?
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, that's bad. I mean, obviously that's bad. And Michael and I have both railed against TIFs numerous times, along with our friends, Kelly Wilson and Whitney Mullica. So, yes, we've railed on TIFs around here.
Why would you rail on TIFs if you don't like property taxes?
Because I feel like just what you said, it's not right for and it's usually a developer that gets the break because they're coming in and it's all about, well, but we'll provide this for the city and we'll provide this and you'll get this and you'll get that. It having yet another way to tax citizens, which eventually it does come down, a TIF basically comes back as a tax, it feels like to me, because you're letting off whatever developer it is, right, from paying those taxes, right, while you're paying them. It's unequal distribution under the law. Again, everybody in the free market, if we're going to argue as Republicans, free market, then you have to make it a free market. You can't dabble in it and give this person that, or give this person that, or exempt this person from that, or and then say we have a free market, because that's not the case. A free market is an unfettered market, and that's not what we have now.
Okay.
That's my argument.
Okay.
And I'm sticking to it.
Okay.
The rest of the property tax burden falls to working families. And that's, I guess, my point. So the developer doesn't pay that, but then everybody else is still having to pay that.
Not really. No, remember, we got to go back to counties are only allowed to raise your property taxes by so much every year, but they're going to do that anyway. Well,
yeah, but what I'm saying is if, okay, so follow me. Maybe I'm wrong. So if the developer that's getting the TIF, right, if they're creating this district to give this developer an out on their ad valorem, right, that's one of the things they're giving them to get this development done, then everybody else is paying while these people aren't. It's another meddling in the free market. If that developer can't create a development that's going to be able to be subject to everything that everybody else in the area is paying, then it's not a free market.
Well, I understand the fact that some would still be paying property taxes while someone else wouldn't. But the argument can't be that we should all be paying property taxes.
Oh, no.
Right. Okay,
no, the property is none of us should be paying property tax.
Right. That part of it I would agree to. But the argument can't be either we're all paying or no one is, because the only option that will survive there is that we all pay.
Oh, yeah, no.
Right. So we have to eliminate that verbiage from the argument. The TIF provides that property tax break to that developer in this situation that you're talking about. Well, we want that same break for everybody else, but I don't want a break. I don't want it called a break. I want to call it a permanent abolition of ad valorem taxes. So while it may look like things are moving in the wrong direction with a TIF, it's not. We're not collecting
yes.
property
This is
tax.
what you and I had an argument over before, which boils down to the giving public tax dollars to private schools. You and I are probably never going to see eye to eye on that. If we're not okay with it, it needs to go away, period. If we're not okay with public schools and they're terrible, then we need to fix them. If we don't like property taxes, then we get rid of them. We don't exempt some people from them and then use the decision to exempt some people from them as well. They shouldn't be paying them anyway. No, I'm not going there with you on that. That means if I have to pay them, you have to pay them. That's the free market. And if you don't like that, maybe the developers would get involved with getting rid of the property taxes if they didn't keep getting exempted from them while the rest of us pay.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but there is nothing supported by the idea that if we all pay property taxes because we can't all move away from it, that is not supported in the free market society at all. What I'm saying is we have to eliminate that verbiage from the argument. Michael's saying, yeah, okay, I see what Jay's saying here. A free market system does not give me the ability to say we're either all paying property taxes or we're not. That's not free. That's not free market. The free market idea here is there's no property taxes. It's not that if we're either all paying or we're not paying. There's a huge difference here in how this conversation morphs. In a free market society, I can't impose my will on you any more than you can impose your will on me. That's not free market. And government's ability to collect property taxes and determine what that is not free market.
Okay, but hold on a second. Let's look at what Alan said. The city is picking winners and losers. The system is abused at taxpayer expense. And then Angela makes a good point. It's not fair that Walmart gets a TIF, but my donut shop doesn't. And that, I think, is the bottom line, is that if you're going to, as the city, say, well, we value this developer more because they're bigger and they're going to pay more revenue, so we're going to let them establish this TIF so they don't have to pay property tax or whatever, however they establish the TIF, whatever that means, that they're not going to pay sales tax or whatever, however it doesn't, the point of the matter is, Jay, that it's not fair for the city to do something to one, whatever it is, fill in the blank, one donut shop, one car dealership, that it's not going to do for the rest of the people. And I completely agree with you that the bottom line is no property taxes, no income taxes. But the argument cannot be, in my opinion, the argument cannot be, well, we shouldn't have them, so it's okay that these people don't pay them because we shouldn't be having them in the first place. That's not okay. Because if we're not going to make this person pay that, then what we're saying is the city or whomever values this car dealership more than the Jenny White family. And no, that's not okay.
Yeah, but ultimately, Jenny, I mean, we know government is corrupt in one way or another. Government always picks winners and losers. Look at the whole green side. Look at the production tax and all that. But you're never, if you have a property tax, you're always going to have that situation. You have to completely eliminate it. Or, I mean, yeah, we can argue and say, hey, it's not fair, this or that, but nothing's ever going to come from that unless it's completely gone. Like what I agree with Jay, to have a free market, you have to have it completely gone in one way or another, because you're always going to have that power sect of people that are going to pick winners and losers no matter what.
Correct. And I agree with you on that part. But what I'm saying is part of that can't be, well, we're going to let this person do this because we shouldn't be doing it in the first place. I mean, that's not okay.
Yeah, it's not okay, but who's gonna stop that?
Well, I'm not arguing that it's okay. What I'm arguing here is that now we've got our nose under the tent. And it's easier for us to make the argument that we should eliminate it for everyone because we've made exemptions for others.
Yeah.
And I am completely on the opposite side of both of you here, completely, because that is not the way government ever works. Government never works that way. And what ends up happening is, and I'm kind of a little irritated at both of you that you don't get that government never works that way. So you can always say, I mean, then it just becomes some kind of it's like well, they didn't have this and they worked out fine. Well, it's never going to matter because it's never going to matter. Government's not going to stop it just because And the argument for giving taxpayer dollars for people to send their kids to private school, but we have to do that. It's the same argument that you guys make for that too. Well, we have to do that because once we do that, then it'll just end up going that direction and everybody will move their kids out of public school. There is not one state in the union where this has happened.
I don't know that was my art to provide. I think maybe people aren't sure where we're going in this conversation, but I never advocated for taxpayer dollars to go to private school. That was never my position. My position was to allow people to keep their property tax monies and spend that where they want to. If we're advocating for the abolition of ad valorem taxes and they don't exist anymore, and they can use that money to send their kid to school wherever they want to.
Okay, wait, stop and go back because you were going too fast and I missed it. Okay, go back again.
Okay, where to?
Well, to the part you were arguing that, and just go slower because apparently I'm too stupid to get at that.
Well, he just said if you keep your ad valorem tax, then you can go spend it how you want to, where you want to spend it.
Right.
I'm okay with that, but that's not what happened with the school choice bill. Was that we got our ad valorem taxes back to do that, because I'm okay with that. Just let us keep our money and do what we want with it. But that wasn't what the school choice bill was about. And the reason why, because I know you're like, well, what does this have to do with anything? And I see where you're going with this, Jay. But what I'm trying to say is I kind of see that argument as like as a tip, kind of in the similar situation that a TIF is. We're circling a subset of families that we're allowing to do one thing, right? Based on the fact that if we allow them to do it, somehow it's going to open up the ability for everybody to do that. And that's not the way it's ever worked in the United States. And it's the same thing with a TIF. If circle this dealership or we circle this area, and here's where we're going to allow this, job creation or development or whatever it is to go on, but we're not going to worry about the rest of it. It never bleeds out onto anything else.
I couldn't disagree with you more on that, Jenny. That is exactly
Marty agrees with me.
Okay. Well, that's exactly how our civil liberties have been extended to every demographic. We've used the argument of equal protection under the law. We've used the argument that everyone is created equal. We've used that in every single argument to make sure that people have the same rights and same powers as individuals. This is exactly how we've gotten things done in this country. Is at some point somebody had to get their nose under the tent to move the needle. That is exactly how things have gotten done. It doesn't happen any other way.
Can you name one thing that you're talking about that has?
Yeah, the women's right to vote. Women didn't always have the right to vote in this country.
But
how did we make that happen? Through the application of the equal, we made the argument that we find in our Declaration of Independence that we're all created equal. Okay, so now and then we come in with the argument found in our U.S. Constitution, equal protection under the law. These are the arguments that were made in order to get this amendment proposed and ratified by the states. But these civil liberties had to be fought for incrementally. So I'm just pulling this out as an example. You're suggesting that getting our nose under the tent in order to move the needle isn't the way government works, but that is exactly how things have worked.
Well, but not in our favor. I'm saying in
that was in our favor.
What was in our favor?
Making sure that women and other demographics had the ability to vote on, and that right was protected and enshrined in our U.S. Constitution. That wasn't always the case.
Okay, and I get what you're saying there. I mean, it's just like, yeah, but how is allowing a TIF equal opportunity?
I don't want you to confuse what I'm saying here.
Okay,
there's a difference between what is fair and what is just. Government is not designed, never was, to be fair. Government is designed, when it's implemented correctly, to be just. The establishment of justice, not the establishment of fairness. Fairness is subjective. Just is not. It's right and wrong according to what we find in our written documents, our agreements with each other, or with each other as collectives or as states. So when it comes to things like TIFs, while I haven't supported a TIF for a lot of the reasons that you argue here, the fact that they do exist allows us to put our nose under the tent in the argument that this exemption from property taxes should exist for everyone. That's the legal argument that gets to be made as a result of TIFs existing, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, I don't follow. And I'm pretty sure that I know what you're saying, but I just don't agree or follow that, because what you're ending up doing in the interim, then before you're saying that we're going to make the argument, and that's that a TIF is going to help us eventually get rid of property taxes, what we're doing is creating a, like Alan says, picking winners and losers on who gets this. It's like the tax break for certain individuals to be able to send their kids to a private school using tax dollars. That's picking winners and losers, because only certain people can do that. We're not allowing that for everybody. We're just allowing it for a certain segment of individuals to be able to do that. So
right. We've created a special class of people.
Correct, which you can't do because that's unjust. Then
enter the legal argument here that now, because this exists, when we apply equal protection, the provision of equal protection under the law, Michael's shaking his head on this, yes, too. Once we apply the other legal provisions here, then we make a much stronger argument that ad valorem taxes shouldn't exist anyway. It's an arrow in our quiver.
Yeah, it's more of a pathway, Jenny. It's this thing was created to give special purpose for, special whatever, incentive for someone to do this, reward, I guess I should say. And by allowing that to happen, now we see it. We're like, hey, this whole thing is wrong. Let's really look at what's going on here, because these people are being treated differently from everybody else. That's not fair. So we need to really look at that, eliminate it, or, remedy the situation in one way or another. I mean, that's what I'm taking.
Okay. Well, I kind of understand what you're saying better. Sorry, Jay. I kind of get what Michael is saying better, but I still don't agree. I mean, I don't agree that it's kind of like,
I don't think we're saying that they're good in any way. I think we're saying they exist, but because they do, now we can look at it and see what's wrong and then remedy the situation.
I'm not accusing either one of you or saying it's right. I'm just saying I don't agree with it.
Okay. That's fine. I don't know what there is to disagree with, but okay.
Well, I guess partly. Well, what I'm disagreeing with is we shouldn't even go down the road in the first place. I mean, we just shouldn't allow the TIFs. We just shouldn't allow taxpayer dollars to go to private school. We just shouldn't allow any of it. And then, because my argument is always the easiest, simplest thing. If there's a problem with something, don't go around the bush to fix the something. Go to the something and fix it. But, I guess
Jenny,
I'm too simplistic.
I agree. Look, I agree 100%. There's a million things the government shouldn't be doing in one way or another, but we have to start somewhere. And if at least the TIF opens the door to get rid of the property tax altogether, I'm 100%. Let's hammer these guys doing these TIFs. Let's expose how the whole deal is so bad so that everyone else can have the same treatment, not pay taxes, not pay property taxes.
Right. We're trying to eliminate property taxes here, not justify their existence. So we got to take steps to move that direction, and we have to be able to make a legal argument to do
me, Michael.
I'm not laughing at
you.
You're
fired.
Just the whole thing.
Wait, hold on. Jay has to do that because he does that so well. Do it.
What's that?
Do you're fired.
Do what?
You're fired.
Oh yeah, there we go.
I've seen a lot of firings. This is one of the best firings ever. Okay.
I'm so sorry. We had to laugh. I mean,
All
I'm
right.
not going to get all salty and PO'd about stuff. Alan says, and we better get off here in a second. Legislator, do you believe that millionaires have the ability to build sporting complexes on the taxpayer dollar like Oklahoma City? I'm using this as an example.
Yeah, no, I do not believe that taxpayer dollars should have been spent on the sporting complexes down there to support the Thunder, and I was pretty vocal about that. That's a private enterprise, and don't get me wrong, I know there's a lot of people in the area that support the Thunder, and I like sports too. If the entity is making the kind of money that the city claims, and if they're generating the kind of revenue that the city claims, then they don't need our tax dollars to make building improvements.
I'm going to do the Trump dance for that one. Okay. Robert makes another point. Well, the TIF is not an exemption from property tax. It redirects the property taxes to pay a special bond. Oh, I guess that's true. And then he says, however, when the taxes in the TIF district don't cover the cost of the bond, the general fund is usually robbed to cover the payment. Ooh, yeah, that's.
Yeah. Hey, yeah. However that works. Here again.
Yeah.
We're not arguing that it's a good thing, and thanks, Alan, for chiming in there on some of those details. We're speaking from a 30,000 foot view on how all of this works, but appreciate the details there and there.
Okay, and sorry, this is the last comment I'll put up because it's about me. I'm going to get myself a crown.
I'm going to need a good picture of Lisa so I can start doing some memes with Lisa in the deal. Jim.
Hey, Michael, when do we get a controller for filtering the comments here?
Never. Okay. In all seriousness, though, Jay, I've really appreciated this discussion, and I'm gonna cut several of the parts out of here because I think you've done a really good job at explaining why we shouldn't have property tax, why we shouldn't have income taxes, why there's not. I mean, we need to go to a use tax, as Julia says. If taxes were voluntary, individuals would be picking the winners and losers.
Right,
and that's
free,
true.
And that's free market.
Correct.
Right. That's free market.
Bingo.
And the other thing that we have to remember here is the tie between a free market and a free society.
Yes.
Right. If we're allowing government to pick winners and losers, what we're allowing in that situation is government to pick our pockets in order to do that. Yeah. And when they do that, they're using its force. The force of government here is in play. And here again, if I don't pay my taxes, then they come take my stuff from me at a much higher level than they originally were coming after anyway. Yeah. And here again, that's not fair. It's not just, and it's government operating outside of its design. Yeah. So we need to understand the connection there between the free market and the free society.
Yeah. Well, we're all for. Well, I can't speak today. Got a little tongue tie thing. We are all for your bill to roll back income tax. And we just, honestly, I just ask, let's just also see if we can't. You said there was somebody who had a bill who was talking about repealing.
It's still in draft.
Okay.
We're still working on that, but
okay.
Yeah, I would expect to see something to deal with that this session.
Well, I do think people are sick of. I think people are finally waking up. I think COVID did a lot of bad things, but I think it did some good things. And that was, I really do think it woke people up to realizing what their government is doing and how much power they didn't realize their government had over them.
Yeah. Sure.
So I think people are ready for this change. And I think, people, as you've well seen from polling, are ready to back you on both of them.
Yeah. And we should do, even if the polling wasn't there, we need to pursue it because of the oath that we took, and it's the right thing to do. Yeah. I'm glad that there's the public support for these types of measures, and that speaks well to, like you said, the waking up here, or the grasp from an educational perspective on just understanding what it is that their government is doing or getting away with in some situations, yeah. and the fact that needs to be rectified. there's going to be a lot of discussion moving forward on how we make all of that happen. And we need to be comfortable having those conversations and finding the common ground to move forward on. But at the end of the day, no matter how we get there, we need to realize what it is that's enshrined in our governing documents, and which parts of those are good, which parts of those are not. Even within our own state constitution, there are provisions that violate our natural rights, our inherent rights, and we need to rectify that as well. And that's only done through the education of the public.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, Jay, thank you so much for being on today, and thank you for educating, I think, everybody. I mean, right, Michael? Everybody. And I think it was just a great discussion. And I get kind of exhausted of the whole we have to agree on everything thing. I don't agree with that. I disagree with that. I think discussion always helps bring things to light. I mean, and I don't always have to be right. I mean, I just like, I don't shy away from having an argument about things or to discuss things. And I just think that's a good thing.
It's healthy.
Yeah. So
well, good. Well, thanks for having me on. I enjoyed the discussion. Michael, I enjoyed my time with you this morning as well.
Yes, sir.
Well, thanks again, Jay. And just, we'll follow the bill and, but if you've got anything that you want to send to us, that you want us to put out on the show about it or something, don't hesitate to, we'll do it.
Okay. Well,
happy to do it. So just let us know.
All right. Appreciate it. Thanks again.
Thanks again, Jay. Bless your heart. You took a long time with us today. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. Enjoyed our time.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That was phenomenal. So glad that we did that. And I'm so glad that we had so many comments, like Lisa said, or whoever said, it's a good thing that we had so many comments. I think that's just phenomenal because I do think it speaks to the fact that people they're getting tired of it. I mean,
well, and I want to make a comment, kind of when we first got on the show, what you first kind of said with the founders and King George, where I think a word that we need to really kind of bring back into the presence of now is sovereignty. Are we actually sovereign? Do we have our own authority and our own power over ourselves and our property and our things? Or are we just subservient, to the government the same way that the founders were? The only sovereign back in those days was the king, pretty much. And that was it. Maybe the king and the church, and that's it. The people, there was no sovereignty whatsoever. I think we need to really work back to, those are our inherent rights, given to us by God, not, and they're supposed to be protected by the government, not literally just overall, slam us in every single way. But I wanted to make that comment earlier while Jay was still on, but we just got off on so many things. But I think that sovereign issue is a major issue of just waking people up and saying, we're the ones in charge. This is our country. This is our land. This is our, this is our way of life. This is our culture.
No, I mean, I completely agree, but I thought Jay did a really great, job of explaining that even at the beginning.
Yeah.
The government can't grant rights. I mean, he said that specifically.
Or give jobs.
Or give
jobs.
That's exactly correct. Or give jobs. So, yeah. Well, we're so late. I'm not going to bring up the goofy thing that I was going to talk about. We can talk about that another time, and I might even pull somebody else in since I got Whitney on it. I may pull Whitney in later, and maybe you and I can have a conversation with her kind of briefly that we could put on, while we're on vacay next week and talk about that a little bit, because this thing is definitely coming from ACOG and probably INCOG too into local municipalities, and people really.
What's ACOG and INCOG?
ACOG is. It's an extra governmental entity that receives taxpayer funds, but that is bureaucratic in nature. None of us can vote on these people that get to, and originally it was created to be the dispersal point for federal highway transportation safety funds. That's what it was originally for, but now they've started using ACOGs and NCOGs as a way to get this WEF nonsense into cities. And because ACOG and NCOG is their membership is made up of elected city officials.
Yeah.
So when I was mayor in Luther, I sat on the ACOG board. We had a one-person vote, whereas like Oklahoma City could put 3 people on the board. We only had one person, who had a vote, because that's so fair. But anyway, that's what this group does, and they meddle in municipalities. And in a lot of cases, like this particular thing that they're doing right now, it's a thing that came from Sweden. Originally, it's, kind of a worldwide thing. And so many cities are getting on it. If you just Google it, it comes up everywhere. So we are going to have a discussion about that.
Yeah. Those
of you who are watching, we still have a really nice audience. So start looking at if you haven't gotten on your list for your municipal business agendas, you need to do that, just like you need to get on the like press releases from the legislature, or any of these other things. You've got to find a way to be educated, and that's not by watching your television. That's not where that's going to come from. You need to get this information to you directly. And the way you do it is by going to your municipality and saying, I want to be on your mailing list for the agendas. And that's, for example, how Nean Clinton, remember, she told us that that's how she found out about this gigantuan multi-thousand acre solar installation that they're trying to get in Enid. So that's what you guys need to do. And Julia says, this is interesting. Side note, the state constitution cannot be found on the like you said, OK.gov website, but the pay your taxes button is active and on the first page.
Yeah. Look, here, I'll show you real quick. Okay. So here's the Oklahoma.gov, the transparency state constitution right here. Read the Oklahoma Constitution. Okay. Well, we're going to click this button. Ready?
All right.
It just stays on this page. It never goes anywhere. Just the link itself, the link on this page, when you look at it, is this page. Yeah. So it doesn't go anywhere.
Lovely. That's your government at work for you. All right. Well, Michael, it's always good to be on with you, and you always make really excellent points, and I'm so blessed to have you to be able to, make those points for me. So even when you disagree with me, even when you won't say I'm 100% right, which
so my contribution to your tombstone is at the bottom. I'm just going to have a little 100% down there on the bottom, just 100% down on the bottom.
Oh my goodness. Well, all I can say is, as I said before, at least I don't take myself too seriously. All right. Well, I am lucky to have you. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. And we were very blessed to have Jay on. Thank you again for his time. That was a lot of time devoted to us this morning. So thank you again for that. And again, thank you so much. Julie says, all right, because it's about me, right? It had my name in it. So the comment goes up.
Okay, so on all the shows from now on, if I do air quotes, you're gonna say something, and I'm just gonna do air quotes, and that's gonna mean we're gonna add that to the list on your tombstone. So you're probably gonna have a front and back tombstone with just all the list.
Just so long as you put that stupid meme on it, I don't care. Actually. All right.
Jenny DeGray.
Again, I'm so glad we can laugh too. It doesn't pay to be mad all the time. And I just don't like that. So we can disagree and still be friends and laugh about it, because that's the way it works. All right, Michael, I hope you have a lovely day. Do not forget, those of you who are watching, we have our friend Mary with Visit on Friday, and yuck. I don't know that we'll be laughing much during that one. No, she's got some really yucky, excellent stuff to talk about. So, but please be there. It's really super important she'll be live with us at 9 a.m. So make sure that you're there, and we will see you again on Friday. Anything else?
That's it.
All right. See you later.
Bye.